All right, so now what we want to do is we want to make it so that this menu, whenever we get to a larger screen, will just show up here, but in a floated fashion off to the right. Okay, so let's jump over here, and what we need to do is come down to the very bottom. I'm going to just hit the return key a few times so we can get this to come up higher. And I'm going to put a little comment in here that says media query for larger screens. Okay. All right, and then I'm going to put this inside of a comment. All right. So now I've got a comment in here, and I want to actually write the basic structure for my media query. So what we want to do is say at media, right, to get it started. And then I like to put screen because it's going to be for screen implementations as opposed to print or something. And then you put the word and then in parentheses, you're going to put your condition, and we'll come back to that. And then you want to put an open and closed curly brace. All right. So let's go inside of the regular parentheses and let's put the condition. So we want to make it so that whenever we hit a minimum width, so that everything we've done so far will be good for the mobile first view up to a certain width. And then once it hits that width, it'll be different for all of the larger sizes. So what you would want to say then is min-width and a colon. And then for the width, let's just start off by saying like 600. That might be good. So 600 px. And you don't put a terminator here, just so you know. Okay. If you do, then it's going to throw everything off. So don't put the terminator there. All right. So there's my condition. So at media, when the screen is a minimum width of 600 pixels, then you're going to change the following or do the following rules. Okay. And so the first rule that we want to fix is that we want to make sure that this global nav and the global nav hover are not going to be weird calculations. So I'm just going to copy this global nav ID, and I'm going to come down here and make a new rule for global nav. And also, because I have a hover state, I kind of want to override that state just in case there's a problem. So I'm going to put a comma, and we're going to make a grouped selection, and we'll say global nav : hover. All right, and then I'm going to put my opening and closing curly brace for this new rule, and we're going to say height is auto. And in this case, I don't care if it jumps. I don't care that it doesn't do the transition, you know, that smooth transition. I actually just want it to jump and be smaller, or jump and be open, I should say. And just remember, when you've got the structure, this is a rule that is inside of a larger media query. So make sure that you don't, this is what a lot of people do, is they forget this last curly brace that closes the media query, and it kind of screws everything up sometimes. So make sure that you're nesting your rules inside your media queries properly. Otherwise, you're going to get some really weird results. All right, so first thing is first. Automatically, my screen is larger right now than 600 pixels wide. Therefore, it's automatically showing the entire global nav ID. Now, if I get it smaller, you see that those rules, they don't kick in, right? So that's the beauty of this, is that those rules will only kick in once I hit a width of 600 pixels or larger. All right. So the next thing that I would want to do, so I'm going to just go ahead and open this up so that I can start seeing what's happening as I style. So the next thing I want to do is I want to make these links so that they are floating. All right. So I'll come over here, and I'm going to say, let's do global nav as the starter so that we know that it's only going to be stuff inside the global nav. So we'll say global nav, you can say ULLI, that's fine, however you want to do that. And then we're going to float the links, not the, well, we're going to float the list items, not the actual anchor tags, because we want each list item to sit side by side. The thing is that the anchor tag, there's only one anchor tag in each list item, so you can't really float the anchor tags because there's nothing sitting side by side in, you know, with them inside of their parent container, which is a list item. What is the float would be the list items, because they're all side by side inside of a list the UL tag. Okay, so we're going to say on the list item here, we're going to say float left, and remember we're doing this inside of the media query, right? So if you come over here, you're going to see it says link, 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 right? And then if you wanted, you could also, you could either give these padding or something, or you could also just tell them how wide you want them to be. So if the list is going to be, let's say 100% of its parent, right, which would be the list, then the list items could be 20%, let's just say. So width of 20%, like that. And then you come here and you see that we get these working that way. All right, so I'm just gonna hit refresh so that those little things will go away. And then we've got our links working just fine. Now, what you could do is you could just leave it that way, but we don't want this menu icon to show up. That needs to disappear. And so in the media query, whenever we are on larger screens, we can have that be a display none. We can have that menu button just completely go away. And so what we can do then is we can find menu, like menu itself, right? And we can, I'm just going to copy menu, just copy that. And I'm going to come down in here inside my media query still. And I'm going to say, when I'm on a screen that's 600 pixels or larger, I'm going to say display and then none, and it will disappear completely. All right, and so that just goes away. But then whenever I'm on a smaller screen, it should come back, right? And if you want to make sure and be really, really, really explicit to make sure that this does in fact show up properly, we're going to take the display property, because this might look different on a different browser. It's always possible. And we're going to come up here and we're going to say on the menu, we're going to say display block. Oops, not bloke, block. And then that way it'll definitely show up if it wasn't there before. Okay, and it was working just fine for me without doing that. However, I just know from experience that there would be times when it would not revert back. All right, so that's a fail-safe. All right, so now we've got this where it's working this way. All right, and then if we open this up, it just appears. Right, and so this might be one way of leaving it, but I think I would like for this thing to show up over here so that this whole thing isn't quite so tall. So in order to do that, let's come back down into my media query. Now what I need to do is I need to address this actual UL. If I want the UL to sit up next to this, then what I need to do is I need to tell it to float. And I also can tell this to float. And if you remember, this is my home. So I can come over here and I can make a home menu, or excuse me, not menu, a home rule. And the declaration that I'm going to give it is going to be float left. And then if I want to be really, actually, and I think that it is already floating left, actually, if I think about it, come up here. Yeah, actually, it's already floating left, so I don't actually even have to say that down here. So let's not. Let's just leave it alone. Let's not add any more rules that we, don't have to have, right? And so, oops, I got rid of the wrong thing. That's the one I want to get rid of. There we go. Okay, so I just want this list right here to float left. So if I come over then and let's go copy the global nav UL, not with the list item in it, but in fact, I'm going to put it above here since it naturally comes in that linear order in the HTML, just to keep it simple. So global nav UL, I'm going to say float left. I can also tell it to float right. And if I say float left, it does that. Let's just do float right. Let's keep it simple. And then it goes off to the right side. And now that it's over there, the next thing that I would want to do is tell it how much space to take up, because now that I'm floating it, it doesn't know exactly how much space it ought to be taking up. And so I can tell it to be a width of, let's see, how wide was this up here? Let's take a look at our, we had a width of 50% for the home logo. So we could say that we want this to also be 50%. We could try that and see what it looks like. And then what we could do, if we want this to move up higher, is that we essentially need to do something whereby we are giving it a negative margin. Okay, so we can say margin top, and then let's just say negative 2m. Let's just start with that and see what happens. And you see that it starts to move itself up. We could come up even higher, let's say 3m. All right, and it starts coming up some more. And here, I'm going to click off of it somewhere, and we could decide whether or not we like that. And right now, it's going to be as tall as this icon needs to be. So if you want this to stay lower so that it is sitting closer to this edge, maybe you don't want it to be exactly 3m, let's say negative 2.5. Maybe that's a little bit better, I don't know. Let's take a look, hit refresh. And then if you want it to line up with contribute though, I think that we might actually need to go back up a little bit higher, let's say negative 3. And that might be a little too high. All right, so if we look at where this line is, let's do 2.7, let's do 2.8 and see what happens. And that might be a little bit better. That looks like it might be a little bit more in line right here. And so that's one way of doing it. And you can decide how much higher you want this to be. You could also have it so that the link comes all the way up the top. You can see what that looks like. Let's try negative 4m, even negative 5. And so the links are up here. Sorry, so that's another option if you wanted. And you can adjust this if you want so that it's not quite so tall. All right, anyway, so that's one of the ways you can do that. And that's at 50%. Now the problem I was explaining before is that if these words aren't link, 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 right? If you actually have longer words, then that might be a problem for you. So let's just change those really fast in the HTML so that we can see what we've got. So the first link, let's just say that it's called About Us or something like that. All right, and then maybe the second one can be products. Just making this up as I go. Maybe this link is, I don't know, mission. I'm just making stuff up. Let's make the last one contact. We can say contact us or get in touch or something like that. And then maybe this one, let's just say sponsors or something. I don't know, off the top of my head. And that looks a little bit crowded, right? So maybe we don't want it to be 50% for that UL width. Maybe we want it to be more like 70%, right? And then you can see that that might be a little bit better. And then you can also look at that and say, you know what, maybe the link text is a little bit bigger than I actually want it to be. So for this particular UL, you could actually also come down here and say font size, and then let's just do like 0.8m, and you see that it gets a little bit smaller, and that might be a better size. You could even do like 0.85 or 0.9, and that might be better, like 0.8, something like that. And then you see what it looks like whenever this happens and you get to a certain size and it turns into a mobile menu. And then when it's not, it's bigger, right? And so you can make a decision about how you like that. I don't know that I like it lined up there. I think I still like it down a little bit lower. So let's try the 0.3 again and see how that looks. It needs to be maybe somewhere in that ballpark. Maybe it's 0.35 is pretty good for lining up with this word contribute. Okay, and then you might even look at that and say, all right, maybe I don't like the height of this to be auto any longer. Maybe maybe the height is not auto, but let's see, what was it up here? The original height was right here. We can go based off of that because it might be a little bit tall. I mean, it could just go to auto, but there's a little extra space here that maybe I don't care for. So let's see what happens if we change that. And it looks like it does collapse it a little bit, and I think I like that better actually. So I think I'm going to stick with my calculation here for the height, and then that will allow it so that on hover it doesn't expand out to be anything larger. Okay. Yeah, and so that's that's a pretty good stopping place for this, and it looks pretty good, I think. And then whenever you do this, it's still working, right? And now there are a couple of other things too that you'll notice. Okay, so whenever I am on a page where the content, let's say, is like maybe like that. Okay, so it's like this where all my content is showing. So on the right side, you'll notice that there's no scroll bar on the right side of my viewport window. As soon as I hover and it expands the length of the page, now I get a scroll bar that shows up. And the problem with that scroll bar is that it makes everything jump. And see this button, it's kind of awkward. Okay, so what I want to do is that there's like a little fix that you can do that it's not going to be good for all browsers, but at least it'll be good for WebKit browsers, which covers Safari and Chrome. And I think that this might also cover Opera, but I'm not 100%. I don't think it does actually. But Safari and Chrome, because those are based off of WebKit um, rendering engines. So if I come up to the top, not before the font, but just after that, I'm just going to paste some stuff and then I'm going to explain it. Okay, so, and I'm going to also put some comments. I'll put scroll bar fix like this, and I'll copy that actually. Let's make it even more obvious like this. Okay, and I'm going to paste that here. And we'll put end scroll bar fix. Okay, so what we're looking at with this scroll bar fix, let me expand this a little bit so you can see it better. It's a little fix that you can use that in WebKit browsers, it'll hide the scroll bar so that you can avoid that weird jump. And so if the first thing you'd want to do is make an HTML selector, and you're going to say overflow scroll so that it forces a scroll for overflow, and then you're going to say overflow X hidden, right? And then down below, this is another thing that you would need to type, which is : dash webkit dash scroll bar, and then your open and closing curly braces, and you're going to tell it to have a width of 0, and that is going to remove the scroll bar space, and then a background of transparent, and that's optional, but it just makes the scroll bar invisible, okay, so that it's not something that's just there. So let's just go ahead, and I'm going to zoom out of that. Let's save that, and let's just jump back over here to Chrome again, and you'll see that even if I move up, I don't have a scroll bar. I'm cutting off the content, but I can scroll. I can still scroll even though I can't grab my scroller. I can still scroll. It's still there, and so it's working out. Okay. Now the thing is that if I hover this, I don't get that really weird jump back and forth. Okay, which is really handy. Now, what's kind of cool is that even though this doesn't technically do exactly the same thing in Firefox, because Firefox is not a WebKit browser, what it does do by me basically setting this up like this, where I'm saying that it's a forced scroll, is that if I were to open the same page up in Firefox and I limit it, it still is going to give me a scroll bar, which is good, and this will still work so it won't jump, but let's say that I am, let's go right about here, right? So right now, all of my content is currently showing. So you'll notice over here, I don't actually have the little scroll bar, but I have the space for the scroll bar because I've told in my HTML style sheet to force a scroll. It's going to show that scroll. And so now whenever I do this, it doesn't jump. Even in Firefox, it doesn't jump, right? It just shows the scroll bar, okay? So that's kind of a nice fix that you can use if you ever are having these problems where the scroll bar just appears and then just disappears, and that really makes things a lot easier, I think, and a lot nicer looking, all right? So you can see that that's working just fine without having that weird scrolling bar, okay? In the next demonstration, we're going to talk a little bit about like what would happen if, because this is up here and it's not fixed. If you scroll, and let's say that you scroll and you don't have your menu up here anymore, how you could either put something that's a back to top button down here, or how you could fix this up here. Okay.